Hi there, I'm Sashi Sivram Krishna and welcome to my course Macroeconomics, a Modern Money Theory Perspective. We are in part 1 of the course Macroeconomics and Money. In lecture 18, we will discuss Essentials of Modern Money 6. Let us now look at some essential elements of modern money that we have not covered in our previous lectures. The first is that the state is a monopoly issuer of the currency and therefore it can never go insolvent in terms of its own currency. Because remember, it can always create the currency. It is an issuer of currency. It is important not to fall into the trap of what we call as the fallacy of composition in macroeconomics. It is true that households or firms can become insolvent. So it is very common that people make the same mistake when it comes to the state. That the state must spend within its limits. That the state is essentially like a household or a firm. This is fundamentally untrue. In an economy, in a society where the state issues its own currency, it is economically sovereign. There is no question that it can go insolvent in its own currency. And therefore the state must not be equated to households and firms. To put it differently, we must distinguish between users of currencies, which are essentially households and firms, and the issuer of currency, which is the state. Now, very often governments issue bonds or securities, and these are considered as debt. And the government cannot have large debt because, like individuals and firms, they will not be able to pay it back. Once again, people fall into the fallacy of composition trap when they think of government securities as a debt which the government may not be able to repay over time. Once again, go back to the point I've emphasized, that the government is the issuer of currency. Remember that bonds are issued only against the currency of the state. Meaning that if you and me have to buy a government bond, we have to buy it only by giving up the state's currency or the state's IOUs. Just like in the payment of taxes, the government first has to spend its money into existence before it can expect to collect it back either as taxes or in exchange for bonds. So bonds are not, in the pure sense of the term, a debt of the government, although they do appear as debt in accounting terms. The government does not actually require this money in order to spend. In fact, it must spend and then enable us to buy these bonds in their IOUs. The reason why governments issue bonds is basically the same as taxes, in order to drain money out of the system so that we have less in our wallets which we could spend in the market and thereby cause inflation. Bonds are a milder way of doing the same thing, in the sense that they do not take the money away from us. They give us an option of holding it in a less liquid form so that we don't spend it. And when we hold it in this less liquid form, we may also earn some interest on it, which is something that the private sector might actually desire. And finally, remember that debt issued by the government, when it's time to repay it, it is not difficult for the government to repay its debts because it creates new money to repay the old, given that it's the issuer of currency. As a user of currency, if I have excessive debt, then there is a problem of repayment for me. because I cannot create the money. I have to work, I have to earn the money. Whereas the government is the issuer of currency, it is the issuer of the money. And therefore there is no question that it cannot repay these dues. We will discuss this further in our lectures, subsequent lectures, as well as subsequent parts of this course. But these are some of the fundamental essentials of modern money.